The more I think about yesterday's game and the outcome, the more baffled I get.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on one more thing, we are talking about Syracuse basketball's loss to Pitt 77-73 yesterday inside the Dome. And I talked about in the postgame a lot yesterday afternoon, early evening, whatever you want to call it, how frustrated I was because it was a game that I felt Syracuse could have won. It was a game where, Pitt on paper has a better roster. They have a much higher net ranking. Syracuse really shouldn't have had much of a chance, but they, to their credit, they played well enough to actually have a chance to win, and yet they didn't win, and it was really frustrating. So I slept on it. I listened to the post-game press conference from Adrian Autry, and I'm even more baffled that they lost. So let me know your thoughts in the comments section below, but that's how I felt after sleeping on it last night. And Adrian Autry spoke about the moments where Syracuse lost this game. And that's ultimately why they lost, where there were some instances where they had a mental lapse with rebounding down the stretch. There were multiple instances down the stretch in the second half. For example, there was a play with under 6 minutes to go where it's Pitt is up by 6 points. Jalan Lowe, he misses a top of the key three, but Damian Dunn is right there for the offensive rebound and puts in a layup to give Pitt an 8-point lead because Chris Bell loses him. He just loses sight of him. He doesn't box him out. Easy layup for Pitt. So that's an example of what Adrian Autry was talking about, how there were moments in the second half where they just didn't do the little things. But at the end of the day, Pitt also had moments like that. So it's easy to say, well, they didn't make that play, and that's why Syracuse lost. And I totally understand that point. I get it. But Syracuse out-rebounded Pitt 48-31. 48-31. Offensive rebounds in the game. Syracuse had 20. Pitt only had 9. By the way, Eddie Lampkin accounted for 8 of those offensive rebounds. So if you take out Eddie Lampkin, Syracuse still has more offensive rebounds than Pitt for the game. And I know a lot of people will chime in now saying, well, Eddie Lampkin misses a lot of shots around the rim. That I will not deny. He certainly misses plenty of bunnies around the basket. That's his one real fatal flaw. He's not the greatest defender either, but that's really a fatal flaw of him is he misses a lot of bunnies around the rim. But Eddie Lampkin only missed 5 shots in the game. So he misses 5 shots. He grabs 8 boards offensively. That means that he grabbed 3 offensive rebounds at minimum where he was not off a miss of his own shot. So was there a moment here or there down the stretch in the second half where Syracuse would have a mental lapse with rebounding? Sure. But for the totality of the game, they killed Pitt on the glass. Here are some more annoying numbers that I came up with, all right? I shouldn't say I came up with, just statistics that I found. Chris Bell, he has not had the greatest season. I think we can all admit that, and I'm putting it pretty nicely on here. Chris Bell knocked down 4 threes in this game. 4 of them. That's pretty good, right? He was 4 of 9 from downtown. That's 44%. That's really good. You'll certainly take 44%. That's elite right there. You would think, logically, that if Chris Bell has a good shooting day, that Syracuse basketball is more likely to win. It doesn't mean they're guaranteed to win, but you would think that if Chris Bell has 4 more threes in a game, the Orange are probably going to win that game. Well, last season, you would be correct. I look back at Chris Bell's game logs last year, and when Chris Bell hit 4 more threes in a game, the Orange went 9-1. That's pretty good. 90% winning percentage right there when Chris Bell hits 4 more threes. And Syracuse only had 20 wins for the year last season. Almost half of them came when Chris Bell had 4 or more threes. This season, Chris Bell has only done it 3 times. He obviously has not had the same year as he had last season, but they're 0-3 when he makes 4 or more threes. They are 0-3. The games are Florida State, Louisville, and Pitt. I get that he didn't box out his man with 6 minutes to go in the game. I understand, but can someone please explain how is that even possible? That when Chris Bell this season, in the rare instance where he actually gets going from deep, he hits 4 or more threes, they're still 0-3. Oh, and they had JJ for all of those games. They had JJ for Florida State. They had JJ for Louisville. They had JJ for Pitt, obviously. Just a frustrating game. Syracuse basketball loses 77-73 to Pitt. They crushed them on the glass. Chris Bell got going from downtown. And coming up, more frustrating numbers here on Locked On Syracuse. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Super Bowl 59 is almost here. 1 game, 2 teams will be left. Endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, you can actually bet on the MVP of Super Bowl 59 right now, even before we know the teams in that game, or even betting on the coin toss. FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll store $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 59. I think we can all agree that when JJ Starling is on the floor for Syracuse, the Orange are a better team, right? I think we can all reasonably come to that conclusion. JJ Starling is Syracuse's best player. He's their leading scorer. And when he's on the floor for Syracuse, they are a better basketball team, right? So please explain this to me. Syracuse led at halftime with JJ sitting the final 11 minutes of the first half due to foul trouble. He picked up his second foul. And Adrian Autry didn't have to put him back in the game. And the reason why was because when he was taken out, Syracuse basketball was down by 1 point. And yet, at halftime, Syracuse basketball was winning the game. That's impressive. So you would think, and this is what I thought about yesterday, and I mentioned it on the postgame, that this is a good sign for Syracuse because he's going to play in the second half, and they're a better basketball team with him. Well, somehow in the second half, they got worse. I get that the defense broke down in the second half, but still, JJ Starling on the floor typically makes them a better basketball team. And somehow they lose the second half despite winning in the minutes where he wasn't on the floor. Just confusing. We can also talk about the turnovers in this one. We know that turnovers have been a bugaboo for Syracuse basketball this season. Well, the Orange had 11 of them in this game, and that's not a bad total. 11 for an entire game, you can take that, right? 8 of them came in the first half, where Syracuse was winning the half. Only 3 of them came in the second half, where Syracuse obviously lost. Now, obviously, I understand that Pitt had no turnovers in the second half. I understand that. But bottom line is that the second half of this game is just so mind-blowing to me. The more I look at the box score numbers, the more I think, my goodness, how did Syracuse basketball not win this game? How did they not find a way to do it? Controlling the glass, Chris Bell hitting 4 threes, winning the minutes where JJ Starling is not on the floor, and you're taking care of the ball better in the second half when you already have the lead at halftime. Syracuse basketball had a worse second half with JJ Starling on the floor and taking care of the ball better. How is that even? This is why I said that this podcast, this game just made me really frustrated, because this is a game that if Syracuse basketball misses the ACC tournament, and I hope it doesn't happen, it could happen. It is a real possibility, especially with the California trip coming up, and then you got Duke right after that. Syracuse basketball, in the blink of an eye, can be 3-9 in the ACC, and we're in trouble if we're 3-9 in the ACC. So if they don't make the ACC tournament, we're going to look back on the season and talk about some of the games where something went wrong, where a bounce here or a bounce there. If that game goes differently, we're going to look back at this one against Pitt. And we're going to say, how exactly did Syracuse not come out on top? You're probably going to comment about the defense. Defense hasn't been good all year. This is a game that they should have found a way to win. They really should have, but they didn't. And Adrian Autry said post-game it was because of those moments. I said yesterday that I think it was just a little bit better execution by Pitt down the stretch. But honestly, when you look at the numbers, it's mind-blowing. I really don't know how Syracuse basketball lost this game. Oh, by the way, Jalon Lowe is a 90% free throw shooter. He missed a few free throws in this one. You could probably tell I'm a little frustrated, and I am, because this is a game I thought they could have won, but they didn't. As far as what is coming up on the podcast, because I am not interested in talking about Syracuse and Pitt anymore, believe me. So tomorrow, we got a mini podcast. We got some good news on the Syracuse football recruiting front. They picked up another commit in 2026, so we'll talk about that. Also, a full football podcast, still thinking about the topic. So, but that'll come out tomorrow. Also, tonight, no podcast, but tonight, the Buffalo Bills are playing in the AFC Championship game against the Kansas City Chiefs. That's at 6:30 p.m. in Arrowhead. Buffalo's going on the road, but guess what, ladies and gentlemen? First of all, if you are a Bills fan that's watching or listening to this podcast, best of luck. I'm rooting for you all. I don't want to see the Chiefs win again, but also, I do think the Bills are going to pull this one out. Hope I'm not jinxing y'all, but they were my Super Bowl pick a while ago. So it's still holding true for now. I think they're going to upset Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. So that's what's coming up on Locked On Syracuse in the future. And of course, best of luck to all the Buffalo Bills fans out there. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. And for your second listen, you can check out the Locked On ACC podcast. Alex Dono and Kenton Gibbs, they keep it real and bring you the truth about where your favorite ACC team stands within the conference. Find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit the like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe and tell one or two of your closest Syracuse friends about the Locked On Syracuse podcast so this channel can grow and reach all Syracuse Orange fans. Best of luck to the Buffalo Bills, and I will see you all tomorrow for a couple of football podcasts.